Imagine you are sitting in this incredibly sterile, fluorescent-lit exam room.
Ugh, the worst feeling.
Right. It's terrifying. The examiner clicks their pen, looks at you over a pair of those reading glasses and just says, describe a movie character you like.
Just entirely deadpan.
Exactly. And the clock is ticking. And your mind it instantly goes completely blank.
Oh, totally. Total system failure.
Yeah, you just panic.
Mm-hmm.
And you end up saying something like completely basic, something like, I like Spider-Man because he punches bad guys and his suit is, very cool.
Which is, honestly, it's a linguistic tragedy.
A tragedy.
Yeah, because you probably have these incredibly complex, highly nuanced feelings about the media you consume.
Right, like you've probably watched the movie 10 times and cried.
Exactly. But the pressure of that exact moment, combined with a lack of structural strategy, it just reduces your vocabulary to this highly basic level.
You just revert to the English you learned in, middle school.
Right. You end up failing to demonstrate what you are actually capable of articulating.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Because for you, listening right now, we are embarking on a very specific mission today.
A really exciting one, I think.
Yeah, totally. We have this huge stack of sources today that are, they're designed to help you completely master an English-speaking exam.
Specifically, we are really tearing apart the methodology for the IELTS speaking part 2.
Right, the dreaded monologue part. But we are not going to just, read you a dry list of grammar rules or, bore you with vocabulary flashcards.
No, that doesn't actually help anyone retain the information.
Exactly. We are going to show you how to take that exact moment of exam panic and turn it into this highly philosophical, really articulate response.
And we are doing that by deconstructing the psychology of modern cinema.
Which is just such a cool angle.
It really is. Because our materials, they basically provide us with this perfect structural blueprint.
Yeah.
We have a specific exam prompt, a really high-level sample answer that focuses on a blockbuster superhero, and a collection of these advanced vocabulary phrases.
Plus that broader Q&A section, right? About, why society actually loves the heroes it loves.
Right, the macro perspective. The goal here is to really bridge the gap between, rigid structural exam strategy and genuine emotional depth.
So think of an English-speaking test not as this daunting interrogation.
Which is how most people view it, yeah.
Totally. Think of it instead as a rigid framework where you can, strategically deploy a really good story.
I love that framing. It gives you the control.
Right. So before we get into the character analysis itself, we need to understand the actual mechanics of the game.
The rules of engagement.
Yeah. Why are we even analyzing a movie character in the first place? Let's deconstruct the prompt from our sources.
Yeah.
It explicitly asks the candidate to describe a character from a film.
But, it doesn't stop there. The prompt always includes these 4 mandatory bullet points that you absolutely must cover to satisfy the task requirement.
Oh, right. The bullet points.
Yeah. You need to identify what character it is, who acted the character, when you saw the film, and finally explain whether you like this character.
Now, when I look at that list, those first 3 points, they just feel like a warm-up.
They kind of are.
Like what, who, when. It's essentially just asking you to recall raw data, right?
They are foundational, sure. But we really need to understand the specific linguistic mechanics of why examiners design the prompt exactly this way.
Okay, so why do they?
Well, the first 3 bullet points are designed to test your basic temporal control and factual recounting.
Temporal control, like time.
Exactly. When you have to address the what, who, and when, you are essentially forced to establish a timeline for the listener.
So you're having to navigate between, past simple, present perfect, maybe throw some passive voice in there.
Thought odd.
The character is played by this actor, and I saw the film when it had just been released.
Precisely. You are demonstrating this basic competence in setting a scene. It is functional language.
It gets the job done.
Right. It gets it done, but it doesn't actually reveal the depth of your cognitive vocabulary.
It's just table stakes.
Yeah. However, that final bullet point, the one that says, explain whether you like this character, that acts as a massive pivot point.
It's like the trapdoor drops beneath you.
It really does.
You are suddenly out of the safe realm of stating facts, and you are just forced into the abstract.
And that is exactly where the actual assessment of high-level proficiency happens. You must pivot from recounting a timeline to expressing abstract feelings, providing complex justifications, and structuring a subjective argument.
That's a huge shift in the brain.
It is. The examiner is actively listening to see if you can handle that exact transition from concrete data to abstract philosophy without stumbling.
Which I think brings us to the trap most people fall into.
The I like him because crap.
Yes. How do you avoid just saying, I like him because he is funny and brave? I mean, if I am an examiner, I have to imagine I hear the phrase, I like him because 100 times a day.
Oh, at least. And to stand out, you have to completely circumvent that phrasing. You just can't use it.
So what's the alternative?
Well, our learning materials introduce this really crucial alternative. It's the phrase resonate with me.
Resonate with me.
Yeah. Instead of starting your explanation with, I like this character, you introduce the concept by saying, one film character who has always resonated with me is...
Okay, I want to push back on that for a second, though.
Sure, go ahead.
If I am an English learner, right,
Sure.
and I walk into this tense exam room and casually say, this character heavily resonates with me, doesn't that sound a bit, I don't know, pretentious?
That's a fair point.
Like, am I going to sound like a robot who just swallowed a thesaurus and is trying way too hard to impress the grader?
That is a very valid concern, and I think it entirely comes down to how you deploy the phrase.
Context is everything.
Exactly. If you use resonates with me and then immediately follow it up by talking about, like, the character's cool car or their laser vision,
Yeah.
then yes, it sounds ridiculous. Because there is a complete mismatch between the high-level vocabulary and the low-level subject matter.
You can't say, his laser vision deeply resonates with my soul.
Exactly. It doesn't make sense, but if you use it to introduce an internal emotional state, it becomes an incredibly powerful tool.
Okay, explain that.
Well, think about the actual physical mechanism of resonance.
You mean like acoustic resonance?
Oh.
Like if you pluck a string on a guitar and there's another guitar across the room, a string on that second guitar will start to vibrate in response if they are tuned to the exact same frequency.
That is the exact mechanism. So when you say a character resonates with you, you are telling the examiner that the character's internal experiences are striking a chord with your own internal experiences.
Oh, wow.
You aren't just passively observing them on a movie screen, you are vibrating on the exact same emotional frequency.
Which means you are essentially obligating yourself to talk about psychology.
And that obligation is the magic trick.
Yeah.
It forces you to use higher-level grammatical structures.
Because you can't just list adjectives anymore.
Right. If you say, I like, you are usually just preparing to list simple words. He is strong, he is smart.
But if you say resonates with me,
You have to explain a complex mechanism of connection, which naturally leads you to use complex sentences, subordinate clauses, and abstract nouns.
there is something incredibly empowering about having the exact structural words to force yourself into a better answer.
It acts as a guardrail for your own brain.
So, okay, we know the foundation. We know how to open the door to the abstract.
Let's look at the masterclass example our sources provide for the actual content.
Right. The subject of the sample answer is Spider-Man.
Yes.
Specifically, the speaker focuses on Tom Holland's version of Spider-Man, as portrayed in the 2021 film Spider-Man: No Way Home, which the speaker watched shortly after its release.
It is really worth noting how efficiently that sample answer dispatches the factual requirements we talked about earlier.
It doesn't linger at all.
No, it establishes the character, the actor, and the timeline in just one clean, compound sentence.
Leaving all that extra speaking time for the abstract analysis.
Exactly. It maximizes the time spent on the high-scoring criteria.
But wait, I have to play devil's advocate here for a minute.
Always.
Of all the complex historical figures or brilliant detectives or, tragic, dramatic leads in cinematic history,
Mhm.
we are seriously advising people to talk about a teenager in a spandex suit for an academic language exam.
I know how it sounds.
Isn't that inherently risky?
Yeah.
Why not talk about a flawless, invincible hero or a really serious historical drama to sound more, I don't know, sophisticated?
It is a super common misconception that the subject matter itself needs to be academic to demonstrate academic language.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, applying high-level psychological vocabulary to pop culture often highlights your linguistic agility much better.
Because it shows you can elevate everyday topics.
Exactly. And the broader Q&A section of our sources actually delves into the psychology of this. It points out that audiences and examiners who, let's remember, are just people, are far more engaged by characters who feel realistic and flawed.
Rather than completely perfect.
Right.
I mean, I guess a flawless character is actually a narrative dead end.
Totally.
If you choose to describe Superman, what do you even say? He is invincible, he always does the right thing, and nothing ever hurts him.
And then you're done.
Yeah, you've completely run out of vocabulary after 10 seconds.
Precisely. Flaws give you something to actually analyze. The source text highlights that modern versions of Spider-Man are compelling specifically because the character feels emotionally vulnerable and uncertain.
Emotionally vulnerable.
Yeah. And to describe this, the text uses a really fantastic phrase, "what impressed me most."
Oh, I like that.
The speaker notes that what impressed them wasn't the special effects or the CGI, but how emotionally layered the character felt.
Emotionally layered. Let's avoid the cliche of saying he's like an onion with layers.
Please, yes.
I think a much better way to visualize emotionally layered is to think of a suspension bridge.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Right. Because on the surface, the bridge just looks like a single solid structure sitting there. It looks calm.
Sure.
But if you look closely at the engineering, you have all these massive steel cables pulling in completely opposite directions with just incredible tension.
Yeah.
And that tension is exactly what keeps the bridge standing. A layered character is the exact same thing. You have fear pulling against a sense of duty, which is pulling against the desire to just be a normal kid.
That is a perfect analogy. And that internal tension is exactly what the examiner is looking for you to articulate.
Right, because it proves you understand complexity.
Yes. And the text provides a structural mechanism for showing how that internal tension becomes visible to the audience.
Okay, what's the phrase?
It pairs the concept of emotional layers with a highly descriptive phrase, visibly uncertain about his choices.
Visibly uncertain. I want to pause on that for a second because from a language learning perspective, pairing an adverb like visibly with an adjective like uncertain feels very strategic.
It is extremely strategic
Why is that specific combination so effective in a speaking test?
because it bridges the internal and the external.
Okay, say more about that.
Well, uncertainty is an invisible internal state of doubt, right? You can't photograph uncertainty.
Right, it's just in someone's head.
But by adding the adverb visibly, you are demonstrating to the examiner that you have the vocabulary to interpret subtle physical cues.
Ah,
You are communicating that the character's internal psychological tension is so immense that it is literally leaking out into their body language, their hesitation, their facial expressions.
it basically tells the grader, I am not just blindly watching the CGI explosions. I am actively reading the micro expressions on the actor's face,
Right.
and I possess the exact vocabulary to explain what those expressions mean.
Exactly. It shows a really high degree of media literacy and emotional intelligence.
So what exactly is the root of that visible uncertainty for Spider-Man?
The source material breaks the character's internal conflict down into a very specific triad.
Okay, a triad. What are the three pieces?
It states that he struggles with responsibility, relationships, and identity.
Responsibility, relationships, and identity.
Yeah.
Man, if you string those three abstract nouns together in an exam, that completely recontextualizes the entire answer.
It really does.
Because those aren't superhero problems. Those are the fundamental anxieties of the human condition.
If we look at this through the lens of developmental psychology, those are the exact three core pillars of transitioning from adolescence into adulthood.
You just shifted the genre entirely.
Right.
It's no longer a review of an action movie. It's an analysis of a coming-of-age story.
Which is much more academic.
Because we all have to negotiate our responsibilities to our community. We all have to navigate the friction of complex relationships. And we all eventually have to undergo the crisis of figuring out our identity.
Which leads perfectly to the concluding thought of that particular section in the source text.
What does the text say?
Because the character struggles with these three universal concepts, it makes him feel, and I'm quoting the text here, remarkably human.
Remarkably human. Not remarkably strong or, remarkably agile. Just human.
Yes.
For anyone listening to this right now, think about how you can weaponize this framework.
Oh, absolutely. It's so adaptable.
Like if you get a prompt asking you to describe a famous person or a historical figure or even just a family member, do not just list their achievements.
That's what everyone else will do.
Right. Highlight their uncertainties instead. Describe the tension between their responsibilities and their identity. Discussing flaws and vulnerabilities is infinitely more sophisticated than just reciting a laundry list of perfections.
Because you are essentially proving to the examiner that you possess the linguistic tools to describe not just the mechanics of what a person does, but the complex psychological architecture of why they do it.
But, internal angst and uncertainty don't make an action movie.
True.
Eventually, that tension has to break. The character is forced to make a hard choice.
The climax.
Exactly. How does this vulnerability actually manifest when the villain is attacking or when the entire world is falling apart? That brings us to the climax of the character analysis, where the speaker shifts from describing the setup to describing the payoff. Morality over muscle.
Right. In the progression of the sample answer, the focus moves really organically from the character's internal passive struggles to their external active choices under duress.
And the text specifically highlights a defining trait here, right?
Yes, it highlights the character's moral integrity.
Let's dissect moral integrity, because one of those phrases that sounds great, but we really need to understand exactly what we are claiming when we use it.
It's a heavy concept. Moral integrity is the strict, uncompromising adherence to a code of ethical values.
Okay.
It means doing the right thing not just when it is convenient or easy, but specifically when it is the most difficult, most painful option available.
And the text contextualizes this, doesn't it?
It does. It notes what the character does, quoting again, when faced with personal loss and overwhelming pressure.
When faced with personal loss and overwhelming pressure. That is just a beautifully constructed clause.
It creates an immediate sense of high stakes.
It really paints a picture of a character who is completely backed into a corner, stripped of all their support systems, and just carrying this crushing psychological weight.
And from a grammatical standpoint, establishing that high-stakes scenario is exactly what makes the following sentence so incredibly impactful.
What is the next sentence?
The text says he continues to prioritize doing what is right over what is easy.
Prioritize doing what is right over what is easy. There is a real rhythm to that sentence.
There is.
But why does a phrase like that score so highly on a grading rubric? What is the underlying mechanical reason there?
Well, when you contrast two abstract ideas like what is right versus what is easy, you are naturally forcing yourself into using comparative grammatical structures.
Oh, right.
Examiners are actively listening for your ability to use structural framing words. Things like whereas, rather than, or in this specific case, prioritize over.
So it's not just a vocabulary test.
Not at all. You aren't just showing off a big vocabulary word. You are demonstrating that you can build a complex grammatical playground where two opposing philosophies can be, weighed against each other in real time.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting in the source material. The text uses a comparison that completely subverts what you would normally expect someone to say about an action movie.
It actively contrasts two very distinct phrases.
Right. Quiet resilience versus physical strength.
The exact quote is that quiet resilience rather than physical strength is what defines him for me.
Let's really think about that contrast, because
Okay.
physical strength is very cinematic.
It's visual.
Yeah, it takes up a massive amount of space on the screen. It's throwing cars, it's shattering concrete walls, it's loud.
It is very easy for an audience to digest.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But quiet resilience, that is entirely internal.
just subtle.
It is the silent, agonizing tension of a character just gritting their teeth, standing back up when they're physically and emotionally beaten down, and absorbing a hit meant for someone else without ever demanding gratitude.
And by explicitly stating that the quiet resilience is valued rather than the physical strength, the speaker is demonstrating a highly mature, critical worldview.
It's a value judgment.
Yes, they are signaling to the examiner that they have the cognitive ability to look past the superficial, multi-million-dollar visual spectacle of the film and engage directly with the thematic, ethical core of the narrative.
And then the paragraph wraps up with a phrase that I think every single test taker needs to memorize immediately.
What defines him for me?
Yes, what defines him for me?
It is the ultimate transitional anchor.
Why is this so crucial?
Because when you have just spent 2 minutes presenting this complex web of arguments, contrasting abstract ideas, and analyzing psychological tension, you need a way to cleanly tie it all together.
You can't just trail off into silence.
Exactly. You have to stamp it with your subjective perspective, saying, this trait is what defines him for me, acts as a really powerful summary mechanism.
It basically tells a listener, hey, I have presented all this evidence, and out of all the chaotic elements of this character, this is the singular central pillar of my thesis.
It shows absolute command and control over the direction of your own speech.
And crucially, I think, it brings a sense of structural closure to the descriptive phase of the answer, which perfectly clears the stage for the final philosophical conclusion.
Which brings us to sticking the landing.
The ultimate takeaway. We have our hero, we have explored their relatable flaws, and we have discussed their climactic moral victory through quiet resilience.
Yeah.
But how do you actually finish speaking?
It's the hardest part for most people.
It really is. Because whether you are in an IELTS exam, a university interview, or just trying to make a profound point at a dinner party, The final sentence you speak is what lingers in the silence after you stop.
It's the lasting impression.
So how do we conclude this answer in a way that proves complete, undeniable language mastery?
The masterclass technique provided in the source material relies on a complete shift in perspective.
A shift.
It moves from analyzing the character as a fictional entity to analyzing what the character actually represents in a broader, universal context.
Okay, zooming out.
Yes. The text states that the character is admirable because he can reflect a realistic version of growth.
A realistic version of growth. I really appreciate that phrasing because it implies that the speaker understands that real growth is never just a linear upward trajectory.
It's messy.
It is chaotic. It involves regression. You take 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
And the text elaborates on this chaotic trajectory, noting he makes mistakes, learns from them, and gradually becomes more self-aware.
Let's talk about that term, self-aware.
It's a big one.
It is a very heavy-duty psychological concept. We throw it around a lot in casual conversation like, oh, they aren't very self-aware. But in this academic context, it shows a deep level of comprehension.
It does.
Because to be self-aware means you don't just act on instinct. You have the cognitive capacity to step outside yourself and critically evaluate your own motivations, your toxic traits, and your collateral impact on the world around you.
Demonstrating that you understand the concept of self-awareness shows the examiner that you can evaluate complex internal development.
But the true linguistic masterpiece of this conclusion is the final summarizing thought.
Oh, absolutely.
I have the exact quote right here. Are you ready?
Let's hear it.
To me, Spider-Man represents the idea that true maturity comes from accepting responsibility even when it comes at a personal cost.
I mean, that single sentence elevates the entire discourse from a simple movie review to a philosophical meditation.
It really does. Let's break down why it hits so hard.
Let's do it.
First, the verb represents. You're no longer talking about a guy in a suit. You are talking about a symbol.
Right, it's allegorical now.
Second, you're defining a massive abstract concept, true maturity, not by age, but by the behavioral metric of accepting responsibility.
Which is a very sophisticated correlation to make. And finally, the deployment of the qualifying clause, even when it comes at a personal cost.
That clause is the absolute clincher, at a personal cost.
Yeah.
But here is my question for you as the expert. How do you deliver a sentence like that without sounding like you are just reading off a motivational poster in an office?
That is the danger, isn't it?
If a student just recites that mechanically, it might sound incredibly canned.
Delivery and pacing are everything here. You absolutely cannot rush it. When you use a qualifying clause, like even when it comes at a personal cost, you need to use a slight phonetic pause before the word even.
A phonetic pause?
Yeah. You let the concept of accepting responsibility land, pause for just a fraction of a second, and then add the condition of the personal cost.
So it's like accepting responsibility.
Yeah.
Even when it comes at a personal cost.
Exactly. It makes it sound like a genuine realization you are having right there in the moment, rather than a script you memorized the night before.
It proves that you possess a deep, empathetic understanding of human sacrifice. It communicates that you know that doing the right moral thing usually results in pain.
It rarely goes unpunished, sadly.
Right. You might lose relationships, you might lose your social standing, you might suffer profound emotional damage, but the maturity lies in absorbing that cost.
And it creates a completely cohesive thematic loop for the entire answer.
How so?
Well, you started by mentioning his visible uncertainty regarding responsibility, right?
Yes, the triad.
And then you conclude by defining his entire existence through the acceptance of that exact responsibility despite the cost.
Oh, that is so satisfying structurally.
It is. The speaker proves they can extract a universal truth from a piece of commercial entertainment.
I firmly believe that if you follow this exact structural blueprint, moving from a factual baseline to internal psychological tension to moral action under duress, and concluding with the universal philosophical truth, the examiner isn't just going to give you a high band score.
No, they are going to remember you.
They were going to walk to their car after work and genuinely think about what you said.
However, we have to remember, in the architecture of the IELTS exam, mastering this 2-minute monologue is only the requirement for Part 2.
Oh, right. You aren't done yet.
No, the test continues. In Part 3, the examiner is going to deliberately widen the lens.
They pull the camera back.
Exactly. They will shift from asking you to describe a specific personal subject to asking broader societal level questions based on the themes you just introduced.
You go from the micro to the macro.
Precisely. You have to transition from using words like I and me to using phrases like broadly speaking, there is a consensus that, or in contemporary society.
So we need to expand our universe for this next segment.
We do. Let's look at the extended Q&A sources to see how our hyper-specific analysis of this one superhero applies to macro-level sociological thinking.
This is where we really need to stretch our analytical legs because the topics get massive here. The sources pose a fundamental question. Do you think films can influence people's values?
A classic Part 3 question.
If an examiner throws that at you, how do you handle it without just saying, yes, movies make people do things?
Well, the source material synthesizes this perfectly. It provides a definitive affirmative, but it narrows the focus strategically.
Okay, how?
It notes that films have a profound influence, but it specifically highlights their impact on younger audiences.
Why younger audiences, though? Why is it crucial to specify that demographic when answering?
Because it allows you to introduce the vocabulary of cognitive and social development.
Oh, smart.
The text implies that during adolescence and early adulthood, individuals are actively calibrating their moral compasses. Their understanding of civic responsibility and ethical boundaries is highly malleable at that age.
They're like sponges.
Exactly. So when these viewers repeatedly consume media featuring well-written characters who embody values like courage, empathy, and perseverance, and, crucially, when they see the narrative universe ultimately reward or respect those qualities, they engage in modeling behavior.
It is the psychological mechanism of parasocial modeling. Like, a teenager watches the hero take a massive physical and emotional beating, get back up, and ultimately earn the respect of their community.
And the teenager's developing brain subconsciously logs that data.
It says, oh, so this is the mechanism for earning respect in society. I should attempt to emulate that resilience.
Exactly. And this leads directly into another macro-level question provided in the sources. Do young people need role models?
Well, based on the mechanism of modeling behavior we just discussed, the answer has to be an undeniable yes.
It is. The text argues that positive role models, whether they are historical figures, public leaders, or fictional characters, serve a vital function.
What's the main function?
They encourage youth to become more self-aware, disciplined, and empathetic.
Because the entire journey of youth is basically just stumbling around in the dark, trying to discover who you are in relation to the rest of the world.
It's a very confusing time.
Role models, even fictional ones in Standex, provide a behavioral template for navigating that chaotic process. They offer a safe, simulated environment for young people to test out different moral philosophies without real-world consequences.
Now let's connect this psychological need for role models to the current cinematic landscape.
Let's do it.
The sources ask a highly relevant industry question. Why are superhero films so intensely popular nowadays?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question.
How do we explain the absolute dominance of this specific genre over the last 15 years?
Well, if we take everything we've discussed so far, the modeling of values, the appeal of emotional layering, the desperate need for behavioral templates, how does that actually explain the box office numbers?
The source material offers a critical sociological insight here.
I'm listening.
It states that these films dominate because they have successfully hybridized visceral entertainment with deep emotional themes.
Okay, action plus feelings.
Yes, but the most important cultural shift identified in the text is that modern audiences do not necessarily admire heroes simply because they possess overwhelming power anymore.
That is a massive sociological shift.
Huge.
Let's really dig into that. Because if you look back at the action heroes that absolutely dominated the box office in the 1980s, characters like Rambo or Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando, they were largely these invincible, muscle-bound, stoic monoliths.
Completely devoid of doubt.
They never showed a shred of internal doubt. They didn't have panic attacks about their identity. They just walked through a literal hail of bullets without flinching and solved every geopolitical problem with infinite ammunition.
Right. And those 1980s characters were born out of a very specific set of Cold War anxieties.
So that makes sense.
The audience of that era desired a fantasy of invulnerability. They wanted a hero who could effortlessly defend them against external existential threats.
But the text notes a divergence.
It does. Today, our anxieties are different. We are no longer comforted by a fantasy of physical invulnerability.
Because our threats aren't just physical anymore.
Exactly. We are inspired by characters who continue to do the right thing despite overwhelming personal difficulties or emotional struggles.
Quiet perseverance, as the text calls it.
Yes.
We have shifted from desiring physical invulnerability to desiring psychological resilience.
And that kind of quiet perseverance feels infinitely more authentic to a modern audience.
Because we exist in a hyper-complex, economically strained, anxiety-inducing world,
Everyone is stressed.
most people feel completely overwhelmed by systemic pressures every single day. So a hero who never struggles emotionally is completely unrelatable. They feel alien to us.
We relate to the struggle to simply remain moral in a deeply difficult environment.
So if you are sitting in part 3 of the IELTS exam, and the examiner asks you a broad question about what qualities contemporary society admires, you do not just say strength and bravery.
That's a 1980s answer.
Exactly. You elevate the discourse, you talk about psychological resilience, you talk about moral integrity, you explain that superhero films aren't just lowbrow action and fantasy, they actually function as modern mythology.
They are the allegorical stories we tell ourselves to process our collective anxieties and define our cultural values.
The quiet perseverance we analyzed in Spider-Man isn't just a quirky character trait, it is the defining psychological trait that modern society desperately aspires to cultivate.
And by utilizing this thematic language and these sociological concepts in your speaking test, you are proving to the examiner that you are an astute, critical observer of culture and human psychology.
You're not just a passive consumer.
Exactly. You are demonstrating absolute mastery over the grammatical structures required to navigate and articulate complex, abstract topics.
Okay, let's take a breath and recap the epic journey of this deep dive.
It's been a lot of ground to cover.
We started with a very rigid structural exam prompt and a list of advanced vocabulary phrases. But instead of just memorizing definitions like a textbook, we used those linguistic tools to map out the anatomy of a perfect narrative argument.
We explored how phrases like emotionally layered, visibly uncertain, and quiet resilience act as your secret linguistic weapons.
They allow you to describe a character who truly resonates with you, which fundamentally shifts your answer from a superficial plot summary to a profound psychological profile.
We analyzed the grammar of contrasting abstract ideas, and we learned that the ultimate way to answer a question about a movie or a book or a historical figure is to turn that description into a mirror.
A mirror, I love that.
You use the subject to reflect a realistic version of human growth and the heavy, often painful cost of achieving true maturity.
And as a final practical takeaway for you, the listener, remember that this framework is entirely modular and adaptable.
You can use it for almost anything.
The progression from establishing a factual baseline to exploring relatable internal flaws, to highlighting moral choices under extreme pressure, and finally culminating in a universal philosophical truth. This specific narrative structure can be applied to almost any descriptive prompt.
In any high-stakes exam or in any meaningful intellectual conversation you find yourself in.
It is the ultimate blueprint for speaking with depth, clarity, and impact. But before we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, lingering question to ponder on your own.
The provocative thought.
Yes, we have spent this entire time talking about why we connect so deeply with heroes who are flawed, uncertain, and who reflect a realistic version of growth.
Because they resonate with us.
We are drawn to them because they represent the vulnerable, struggling parts of ourselves that we are desperately trying to improve.
They act as our moral aspirations, wrapped safely inside our own insecurities.
Exactly. So, if we love our heroes because they demonstrate the agonizing difficulty of doing the right thing over the easy thing, what does your favorite villain say about you?
Oh, that is a dark turn.
Think about it. If the hero represents the part of us striving for moral integrity, what hidden, suppressed parts of our own psychology do we recognize in the characters who simply give up?
The ones who choose the easy path.
The ones who reject responsibility entirely and who let their trauma completely consume them and turn them bitter? What does it say about our own internal state when the villain is the character who truly resonates?
It's a fascinating inversion of the entire psychological framework we've discussed today.
Just a little something to think about the next time you find yourself secretly rooting for the bad guy. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.